It should see if it's streaming. I'm going to continue to do the recursion thing today. And I think I might transform that into a website. I'm thinking about trying to incorporate WebSockets today, so I can see in real time what's happening when I run the script. I think that's going to be... It would be really interesting, but it might be very hard as well, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to make it happen. But yeah. And apparently I think that the thing that was not wrong, but the reason why I wasn't getting the events yesterday is because I didn't have anything on the return statement. So when I was returning true or false, it wasn't giving me anything. But then when I returned the string, it started giving me the OP codes, the lines, and the return statements on the return events. And here I also think that it wasn't returning anything when I had more code here, because it didn't have a stack. It was just outside of a function. So, and now apparently it's working, where I'm receiving the return and the call. And what I did so far is just put this, just make like a stack here, and then I append this stuff to the stack, the frames as they happen on the call. And then once I get to the return events, then I pop the things out of the stack. But I think that this is not 100% correct, because they were like, and this is what I want to investigate now, because it's giving me this structure here, which means that like they are disconnected, and I think that they should all be connected, but it may be because there are different stacks being used. So that might be the case, because I remember on the first time that I did there with the frame ID, that I was getting 3 distinct ones, I think, and I'm not 100% sure what that means, but yeah. So I want to think about how, if it is possible to have a way so that they are all connected, because obviously it comes from the same function, so it should be just one big tree. So I think that the disconnection happens when they pop the elements here when they are returning. So it goes recursively, and then once it reaches one of the parent nodes, let's say, then it pops everything out of the stack. So it's going to reheat this condition, and then the nodes are not connected anymore, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, because this one is supposed to be... So maybe I should make it so that I should put a condition here that checks to see if the stack is not... if the stack length is greater than, or yeah, different than 1, or greater than 1, greater than 2 actually, because I just wanna, like, I always wanna keep at least 1 element. Maybe that's the way, because I think that when it reaches the return statements to what would be the highest level, let's say, from 1 point, I still don't want the thing to be out of the stack, because it's gonna be a common node between nodes, I think. So it's gonna be like one of the situations where it gets to a parent node of a bifurcation, and then this stuff happens where it splits them into multiple parts. But the reason why, like, obviously the next step after figuring this out is going to be to incorporate the global and local variables on each one, the information of the global and local variables. And based on the numbers here, I know like the order that they happen. So the 0, 1 is the first one, I think is somewhere here. Yeah, this one. This is also a weird thing, because, and I guess that the reason why this happens is because I'm increasing each time. So between the function calls, there's a bunch of stuff that is happening between the lines. That's why the numbers jump around and they're not linear. So I can do another thing for this. I could just increase here on the calls instead of increasing here. I think I'm gonna do that. Just put, maybe I'll put here. Yeah, so once I have the information of the local and global variables, I can understand how they are changing from node to node. But I think it would still miss something. But that's gonna be very hard to know. I have to think more about it, because like the essence of what I'm trying to get at is to try to understand at the point of the recursion what happens with the global variables, how to structure the global variable. So like I want to abstract or extract what is fundamental about the recursion, because I think that from the videos I watched, people say that is the same as doing a loop, but I think I disagree with that, because like it is a loop, but the difference is that the recursion incentivizes a different stack. Like the way that the loop is being done is different, I think. If you do a normal loop, it's just you're going in a linear direction, but because of the nature of stacks, when you do a loop with recursion, it's not like you're doing a loop. You are going in a cycle, but you're going in a cycle in a frequency. So there's this concept of the Lagrange interpolation, I think, or no, it's not the Lagrange interpolation. It's the fast Fourier transform, where you're changing, you're getting some cycle and transforming that in a cosine or sine, I think, because it's the same thing. Like it's just different ways of observing the same thing. And I think that this is exactly what's happening here. The loop is going on a cycle, but the recursion is going on a cosine or sine function. So they're the same representation of different things from different lenses. But that's why they're fundamentally different, but they accomplish the same thing, because the recursion is going on a wave function across the path, and the normal loop is going on a cycle. So what I want to capture is the frequency of the cycle on the recursion, so I can understand like how to create a structure to think about the boundaries that you can put, and how the variables are going to change inside of the or outside of the recursion, so that you can solve problems. And where you put the recursion matters as well, because it's like you're combining different ways, so you're doing Lagrange interpolation. So every time you call recursively inside of the function, it's like you're doing Lagrange interpolation. It's really interesting to think about. Because you're combining multiple different waves, let's say, because of the way that the stack works. It goes in a symphony like. So I want to clarify how, like, what are the boundaries of the symphony? Like, how does it work when it reaches the bottom? At what point it goes back, and how to track the movement? And I think it's obviously to the point that the recursive call was made. I think like it goes to the bottom, and from that part. But each time that you made a recursive call is like you're branching possibilities. It's like an unresolved thing, and then from that point it's going to explore again. So it goes back to the last time that it made the call, and then it goes to another path. And that's the sine or cosine nature of the recursive function. But then how do you reason about that with the information that you have? That's the key thing here. And especially when you're going on a loop, like what's happening there. That's when it gets really complicated, I think. And then you're combining like the cycle of the loop with the sine function. So you're like opening multiple different waves as you go. It's like throwing a rock on the ocean where you have multiple ripple effects. I think that's what's happening here when you do a loop with recursion. So you throw the rock, then each time the rock touches the water, it creates the ripple effect. And it can touch multiple different times depending on the size of the loop. And then each ripple effect is like the data being shaped through the function. So the question is, how do I capture the waves on the graph so I can understand the movement of the data? The thing is, like, it feels that there's something, but it might be because of I just didn't put the information yet. But just looking at the numbers, like, there's nothing I can see. It's difficult to know, and I guess the reason why is because of the depth of the thing. Because when you're looking here, you're looking at the superficial parts, but when you're looking at the graph, it's like you're looking at the ripples of the waves. Because here is just hard coded. But there, because, and that's the fundamental thing, I think. That's the reason why I think that the normal debugging is not very efficient, is because you're just looking at the surface. You're not looking at the ripple effects of whatever is happening in the code. But when you look at the graph, you can see like all the iterations that are happening. But, and I think most people would probably do this on their mind when they're debugging, because what you're usually doing is like you're stepping through the function and you're imagining what's happening as you step through with all the variables. So you're creating the graph in your mind of what's going on. And I think that this is the reason why it's hard there, because if I just look at the iterations here, if I just look at the number, then I know that's a bunch of stuff happening, but I still can't capture yet, like, at what part it is happening. That's why I think that the WebSocket is going to be very good, because then it allows you to step through the function while you visualize how the connections are being formed. I think that's going to be very valuable. But then the whole challenge about this is that I might have to change all of this stuff in the network X, and I'm probably going to have to use Vue.js and then combine Vue.js and then do a whole website, and like it gets very complicated. And then the problem is that there are unknowns. So it means that I might encounter a problem and then spend too much time, and then it's the whole like question about like all the bunch of shit that you can do, and it gets complicated. So that's why I'm not 100% sure if I'm gonna be able to make it. But I think the first thing I should try is just this thing here, where I put a condition here, and then if the length of the stack frame is greater than 2, greater or equal to 2, then I pop. Otherwise, I just leave it like the way it is there. And I think the count here is also gonna help. And also the other thing that I did was comment the thing out so that it stops opening the website when it finishes. And the way that it works is that it uses a library called web browser, and the web browser uses the default browser of your system, which in my case, it is the Internet Explorer, but I changed to Chrome, and it was Chrome, the default, and I went to change and I saw that it was Chrome, but for some reason it opens Internet Explorer. I think it's some fuckery that they do, which is very annoying. I hate when companies do that, but it might not be intentional, so I'm not 100% sure, but it's probably intentional. So they pretty much make it so that if you're using Windows, the default browser is going to be Internet Explorer. So you can change by changing the methods that the function calls. So you can get the other browser before you open the thing, but that and that worked. It was opening on Chrome. So you use this get method here and modify the source code of the library, and then you put the Chrome path or whatever browser you want to open, and then it opens. But it wasn't opening the site directly because it wasn't opening. It just gets the relative path from but it doesn't get the local host or whatever thing you're using. And I didn't want to spend time figuring that out, so I just comment it out so that it doesn't show the website after. But what I'm gonna do is just open with the live server. I already have it open here, so just open again. So I asked ChatGPT yesterday as well. And I think the way to do it is going to be like you create the graph and then you pass the graph through an API using Flask, I think, or whatever framework in Python. And then you get the data from JavaScript and use Vue.js instead of Network X to build the graph. You just use the data. You just use the network access, I think, on the backend to create the data. Yeah, now it looks like it is everything connected. And then the obvious also downside of this is that I'm not sure how to make it so that, because this is a simulation that they get from another library, I think, that has a physics engine. And I'm not 100% sure how to make it so that it is like more of a tree. It looks more like a tree instead of looking like this way. But obviously it is a tree, but it's just because of the physics simulation that is showing like this. And you can do different parts here as well. Different styles of simulation that uses other mathematical equations probably to simulate the movement of the particles or the nodes. But none of them give a good tree structure. Yeah, here is still going through. It only shows these numbers here, which is weird. Because now I'm only increasing when it calls there, so it's kind of strange. Oh, but here it goes, yeah. So here it is directly to 1. But maybe I'm doing something wrong here. But maybe not. Maybe it's just because it explores this path and then it calls recursively, then traces back to the source, the base level, and then from the base level it explores the other ones. I think that's what's happening. So it goes through 7 here, then it goes through 8 here, and then it goes back. Because it depends on how many recursive calls you have until you reach the base case, I think, from the top level. And I think this is going to depend. This is another thing that obviously I'm going to test, just putting in other functions. And obviously what I thought about as well, and this I thought about in the beginning, the very beginning, the first time I did this, which is to, you can hook up like a web scraper to this, I think, and then you can scrape, for example, Kaggle or Stack Overflow, and then you can get, similar to what they do with ChatGPT, you can just get a bunch of scripts, and then you can train a machine learning model to create visualizations, and then you can associate the geometrical structure of the graph with the logic of the scripts, and then you can create some statistical model probably that allows you to see what is the Pareto distribution of the software design. And that's probably going to be analogous to the way that the electromagnetic field is shaped in relationship to space-time. Because that's all that software design is. That's all computer science is, I think. Just mapping out space-time with the electromagnetic field. By the configuration of the electromagnetic field, in relationship to space-time, you create an informational field that changes the nature of space-time, based on a reference frame from observers. So this is what's happening here, I think. But obviously the challenge with this is that the structure of the geometry of the graph is going to depend on the simulation. And the simulation has the embedded assumptions of science, which is a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think you can get through a decent, like you can create a system based on that, where you're just like, it makes a lot more clear what kind of tech stack, let's say, you can use for a certain problem, because you have the machine learning models that are like that learn what is the best geometry to solve a specific problem based on the context of the data. And so the difficult thing here is, like it always is, the difficult part is to know if I made a mistake, and if, even though it works, it's not representing. That's why I'm not doing anything now, is because I'm trying to think about whether or not this is correct the way that I did here. But I think it is correct, because I'm just implementing like the fundamental nature of the stack, I think. You just append everything, and then the last thing that was appended, you pop out of the stack, and that's the flow. So I'm mimicking the stack here, and the way that it executes, and then I'm creating the graph, the nodes based on that flow. And I think that represents the actual execution of the script, of the function. So I think that I'm gonna erase all this stuff here because I'm not gonna use. Probably if I build the website, what I'm gonna have to do is use. And this is another thing that I've been thinking about more, which is to get more used to using a Git, but I kind of hate doing that because it's outside of my comfort zone. Because it's really, really annoying when I need to change something or I'm very focused on what I'm doing, and then there's a problem with Git because I made a mistake, and then I have to figure out the whole tree, because that's also another problem where the Git tree, the workflow, like there isn't a very good tool that allows you to visualize what's happening with the branches. And that makes it a lot harder to understand and to navigate what is happening if you're using Git. And that's another thing that somebody can work on, I think. That would be really interesting. Maybe you use something like this where instead of visualizing the scripts in Python, you visualize the Git flow. But maybe there are tools like that, and I'm just not aware of them. But the other challenge here as well is that, this is something that I think like is way further if I'm gonna focus on that, which is that obviously the way that I'm building this is only gonna allow me to study things about Python, maybe JavaScript as well, because the graph is going to be built on JavaScript, so maybe Python and JavaScript. But then if you want to extend to other frameworks, then it becomes more complicated, because then I have to do the same. Like obviously the principles are going to be the same, but then I have to study all the libraries to build the graph using the stack traces. But I think that doesn't matter that much, because the essence of what you're studying, it doesn't change. The only thing that is going to change is the geometry, depending on the language, because of the nuances of how the memory is going to be structured on each language. So the essence is the same because it's a multifractal pattern. It's like in everything in life. So it's both the same and different every time, because it is the yin and yang symbol, which is a multifractal spiral, where you have the dots. So there's half black, then you have the white dot inside it, and the half white and the black dot, and that's the gradient of the nuance that creates the informational system of the identity, which is the connection between space-time and the electromagnetic field. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is use ChatGPT now, and I'm going to try to build. I think I'm going to try to build it in Svelte or Vue.js. So that's the first thing that I have to think about, because I don't want to do Next.js, because I remember trying to build something with a canvas in Next.js, and it's very annoying because the way that React works is through it updates the whole website every time there is a change, and you have to use a fact, and then you can use memoization or other things like that. That gets really complicated, because every time that there's a new input or new data, it updates the whole tree, so it creates this cycle. And then if you don't put the callback function on the use fact, then it creates an infinite loop. And then with the canvas, it's really annoying because you're updating the thing all the time, and then you can use other libraries, but then it gets really complicated. And I just didn't like the whole experience of trying to do that with React. So I'm not familiar. I've never used Svelte or Vue.js, so I don't know how they work. But I think that they might be better for creating something that needs a canvas. So I'm going to try to use them, I think. So the first thing I have to do is decide which one that I'm going to use, Vue.js or Svelte. And what I want to do is try to incorporate a WebSocket to this. Like, what I want to be able to step through the script, and as I step through the script, it creates the nodes. Because that way, like, it would be perfect if I could just use the debugger here. And then at the same time that I debug here and that it goes line by line, it creates the graph on the side. That's the fact that I want to achieve. I don't even know how to run the debug on VS Code. I think it's here. Yeah, debug, and then you can put stopping it here. And this is the thing that it might not be very useful what I'm doing. It's just that I don't have a lot of experience. Like I'm not used to using debug things, because usually I feel like the print statements are very like, because the way that I always worked is, even in college or everything that I did, I never, like, I forced myself to never use a calculator or things like that. I always try to do everything on my head. And the reason why is just like similar to the gym, when, like, there's nothing wrong with using straps or gloves, but if you use those things, then you become dependent on them. So the way that I look at it, you should always try to do the hardest thing first, and then force yourself to do that. And then once you become used to that, it becomes your baseline. And then, like, people that can do the hard thing can do the easy thing as well. But people that can do the easy thing not necessarily can do the hard thing. So that's how I look into coding as well. The same thing. Like, if I can debug and visualize everything on my mind, I'd rather do that, because then it trains myself to do the hard thing first. And then if I can't do it, then I should go. But because I haven't worked in very big systems yet, or with a team, then that's why I think that I didn't need to use the debug tool as well so far. So I'm not very used to using that, and I'm not 100% sure, like, all of the things that you can do. So, like, from the point of view of someone that has more experience and that uses the debugging more often, they might think that what I'm building here it doesn't matter. But yeah, so it might not be very useful. As useful, I think it is. Might just be because I don't have a lot of experience. But I think that from the point of view that I'm at right now, it seems that it's going to be something very useful if I can make it happen. So yeah, that's the fact that I'm trying to achieve. Like, as I step through here, it creates the graph there on the side. And then obviously, what the other thing you can do with that thing is just study software design. Like, there's several things you can do, I think. Like, once you have the data, if you can scrape the data and then you train the models and then you create the geometrical structure, then you can analyze the probability, which is going to be like distribution of densities in space-time. Like, the problems are going to be very similar. So, and it's very similar with the thing with the ChatGPT and these other models where people are talking about, the problem with them is that they're not reliable, they lie all the time. Like, what the fuck does that even mean? Because, like, you never know if someone is lying or not, because they don't know what the truth is. So it's all relative. So all that matters is the distribution of densities in space-time in relation to reference frames. And that's what the laws of physics really are. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you create past and future simultaneously because it's a symmetry. So it doesn't matter if an AI model lies or not. All that matters is the structure of density of the information that makes up the geometry of what they are saying, let's say. And if there's a high density in the informational structure, then it doesn't matter if it's a lie or not, because the universe is going to be a distribution of lies and truths, because it's a geometry. That's what the geometry is. It's a multifactorial structure. But obviously, there's always the risk, and that's the problem, and that's where things always get tricky, which is the connection between the symmetry, because that's an infinite singularity point, I think, which is a multifractal paradoxical structure. So once you reach to the limits of science, you get into spirituality, and then you get into the danger of the narrative warfare to control the mind. And that's where it gets complicated, because then if you go into postmodernism and you say that you can't really tell everything with science because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy and you are part of the experiment, then how do you reach sense-making coordination at scale? It becomes impossible, because then it's like there's nothing you can hold yourself to, because it's all about different opinions and everyone has different feelings, and there's no common ground. But then the optimal way, I think, is just the paradoxical point that encapsulates the symmetry. It's a superposition of the symmetry. And that's where most things evolve towards, let's say. So like confidence, for example, is a paradox that encapsulates the polarity of humility and arrogance. So when you have the superposition of humility and arrogance, you have confidence, but it's impossible to be truly confident 100% of the time because there's an infinite amount of complexity of all the information that can happen, which is the informational system of the universe. And the evolution of the universe and the transformation of space-time is the growth of entropy in relationship to a reference frame, which is the evolution of this symmetry, this relativistic symmetry. That's why it's a paradox, because at the same time that it's symmetrical, because that's the nature of perception, is the separation between an observer and what's being observed, which is an illusion, which is why at the boundaries you have a multifractal structure, because it's all about the relativistic frequency, because the underlying substrate is infinite potential. So it's the symmetry is always relative to the current state of the space-time, which is the self-fulfilling prophecy, which is the simultaneous creation of past and future through a reference frame from the awareness, which is a frequency. So computation is that relationship between the distribution of densities and the fluctuation of this polarity field, which is the geometrical structure of hardware. How do I remove this stuff? So I think I'm gonna use ChatGPT to ask questions here. But the thing is, that's the problem, is because the machine learning models are not, like, they don't have so much information yet that, and there's also this other problem because it's both the amount of data and the structure of the geometry that makes up the data, because of this nature of the codependency between the two, where it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy, because you can only make conclusions about the data. So the algorithms are the data in a way, because it's a symmetry. But for like the higher level of complexity you go, and this is the evolution of informational field, that's what I'm talking about. That's what produces entropy, is that you have information, which is data. We have data, which is the electromagnetic data, I think, is the potential of the space-time. And then the configuration of the electromagnetic field is the computation, which is the geometry in relationship to that potential. So that evolves and it becomes more dense in relationship to reference frames. And that density is what we call truth, because that's what matter is. So what that means is that there's this natural evolution through machine learning models to become more in alignment with the reference frame that is creating them, because it's an informational system. So the density increases, and what that means is that right now there isn't a lot of information, and the structure of the electromagnetic field, which is the geometrical structure of these large language models, is not accurate enough to handle complex topics. So the evolution of these models and what we call intelligence is always going to be to bridge the gap between whatever we consider to be true now and what is not. So what that means is that for simple things, I think that machine learning models are good, but then the higher scale of complexity you start to go, the worse they become, because there isn't a lot of nuance on the information. But it is a relativistic thing, I think. Because I think that the difference in complexity is just a difference in scales of observation, because there's always an infinite amount of potential. So when people say more complex, when you're thinking about the whole structure of the universe, let's say, for example, when you're trying to analyze everything that is happening, like you're just, the difference that you make from that to something that is very specific is just a relative frame. You're just delusional over how simple you think that things you take for granted are, because they're self-evident for you, because you are in the delusional state of the comfort zone, which is with what we call routine. So the only reason why people think that aliens would be special is because they forget how special everything that's right in front of them is, because they take that for granted. So you become used to it, so it becomes self-evident, so it becomes obvious. But what you're doing is actually compressing infinite complexity into one state, and that's what we call like obvious. but the level of complexity is always the same. You're just changing your perception, and then your perception creates the geometrical structure of the universe. So it's always relative. But yesterday, I think I asked this question, and like the answer wasn't very good for me. The thing is that I need to understand. So when you get into things like this, I think the best thing to do is break down the problem and then just ask questions that are more specific. So I need to understand more how the framework works and what are the fundamental differences between Vue.js and React and Svelte. And this is very hard to think about because I don't know very well, like, what are the nuances of. I understand React, but on the concept level, I think I don't really understand, like, on the memory management and on the structure of the way that they built the library, how it works, and why it's different than the other stuff. I think the main difference is probably only on the parsing, so the syntax tree that it creates, because that's going to be determine the flow of information, I think. So, and that's what it allows you to combine HTML and JavaScript. So all the difference between all of the languages is just that. It's just the way that they parse the information. And that's an extension of the way that human beings work, I think, because we project into the computer the system of that we use to navigate. So what we're doing is always to compress infinite complexity into a concept. So we're simplifying reality, which creates the structure of the geometry, which is the electromagnetic field interacting with space-time. So the difference between languages is the parsing. So, like, the perception of the geometry, let's say. And that's a consequence of how you build the syntax tree. So how do you decide to define meaning for each thing, and how that meaning is going to translate itself into the geometry of the hardware of the computer. And that's going to be connected with space-time, which is big O notation. So the structure of the information, the way you decide to handle the information on the computer is connected with the flow with the densities of space-time. And the flow of information is always going to be related to the way that the electromagnetic field handles space-time. Because it's the same thing. That's the informational field, which is computation. So I think that the main difference on languages is probably going to be on the syntax tree, and that's going to translate itself on the way that all the parts of the computer are connected, which are different registers, I think, and the computer counter, putting labels at different places, and then changing, like, the way that the sequence is going to be, which is very analogous to the way that recursion and normal loops are related, because at the surface they seem like the same thing, but because the order of the sequence of steps changes, it changes the whole nature of the thing. And that's why recursion is better for some things, and normal loops are better for other things. And that's why recursion is very confusing, because it's not intuitive. Because the way you think about it is a loop, but it's not a loop, it's a wave function. So what can I ask? Maybe I'll ask a broad question first. So I think the first steps, let me see some. Yeah. So the first step is choose framework. I'm between Vue.js and Svelte. I think it's either, I'm not going to use React. I just use it. We just want to ask questions related to React because I think I have a decent understanding when it comes to the concepts of how React works. But I still don't know very well on the source codes, how it works on React, and what are the consequences when it comes to memory. But I think from a higher level, I understand. So I want to understand which ones, because yeah, I want to choose the one that is going to be easiest to update with the canvas. And I think if I am going to make this like a website, I'm probably going to link this on my blog, but I'm not going to put it on the blog because the blog is done with Next.js. But I think I'm going to create a link on the nav bar to the thing, and then I'll host this thing on Vercel as well. And then the other thing that I'm going to have to see, because there's two different approaches. One is the easiest one, which is just to put a bunch of scripts that I make and then I select. And the other one is to allow people to type their scripts on the IDE, similar to what Python tutor does, and then allow them to visualize their own thing. But that would be far more complicated and far more dangerous as well, because then they can put stuff to hack the website. And that's the stuff that I'm concerned with, if I'm going to make that happen. So I'm not really sure if I'm going to make that happen. And that would be more difficult as well, because then you have to handle multiple operational systems, because you would have to code the mechanism that would allow the website to connect to their IDE as well, which I think is possible to do. Like you can make them put a script, and then you can code something that searches for the file inside of their system. Like maybe they give you the path or something like that for whatever the project is. And then from that, you can code a bunch of stuff that uses the OS library or the sys library to communicate with their system and find the files and associate the sequence of steps on the script with their stuff that's happening on their computer. But it gets far more complicated. So the next step, I think, is figure out, maybe I'll have to study VJS, how to pass information from the stack trace to the front ends using Flask, probably. Get the information and use it on this JS, updating it with a WebSocket. And the thing is, I'm not 100% sure if I'm gonna do this, because like I said, it might be because I have this tendency, and I think there's a lot of people like me, where I use too many ideas, so like it might be a mistake for me to do this, because then it might bring me to something else, and I won't finish the poker stuff. So I want to make sure that I go back to the poker thing, and I finish that first, maybe. Maybe not first, but that I make sure that I finish that one, because I think that the one's, like, I'm very excited about that one. Ideally, I would be able to do both of these things, I think. But this one is very interesting to me as well, because I think that it was one of those things where if I make this happen, it's going to be very useful, I think, for everything that I'm going to do with Python, or even studying algorithms in general. What you could do is just the stuff that I thought about with web scrapers, which is to just get all their algorithms from LeetCode, for example, and then create a machine learning model, and then create a geometrical structure that allows you to see the frequency of the problems and the multifactor structure of the problems itself, and how the geometry of the problem works. So that way you study the geometry instead of studying the, like, each specific problem. It's like studying the multifractal, which allows you to solve all the problems that are going to be similar to that way, because then obviously they're all going to be different, but then the framework is going to be the same. So like it would be something, for example, that allows you to see exactly where you're going to put each part of the code, and then you don't have to think about solving the problem anymore. Like, because it's always going to be the same thing. When it comes to memory management and syntax part, there's a fundamental difference between Vue.js. It's a template-based syntax that is parsed by the compiler at build time. This means that Vue.js applications have a larger bundle size since the compiled template code is included. During runtime, Vue.js uses a virtual DOM to manage updates to the UI. The virtual DOM is an in-memory representation of the actual DOM, which allows, I think React also uses a virtual DOM. It allows Vue.js to efficiently update the UI when changes occur. Svelte, on the other hand, uses a compiler that generates highly optimized JavaScript code at build time. Let's see. So they're both at build time, compiled at build time. This means that Svelte applications have a smaller bundle size and better runtime performance compared to Vue.js and React. Svelte also uses a unique approach to handling reactivity called reactive declarations, which allows developers to declare reactive values and expressions without using a virtual DOM. React uses a JSX syntax that is parsed at runtime using Babel. JSX is a syntax extension for JavaScript that allows the developers to write HTML code within their Java. The other thing I was thinking about is using WAS, WebAssembly, with Rust. But then that's the thing. I think that it would be interesting to do that, but then later on, probably. If I manage to do everything with Python and JavaScript, then I can think about that. I want to be able to have more control over the way that the graph works. I think that's the main thing, because that allows me to implement everything. If I can change the nature of the graph, and also the physics simulation would be very interesting as well to manipulate. So these parts here, but I suspect that this is very hard. And I think that now that I'm going to study Vue.js again, I think the way that I did things in the past were not very good, because I didn't understand. I think I might be wrong about this, obviously, but I think there might be a much more easier way to manipulate the Vue.js library, because back in the day I didn't understand that the code I was looking at was from after it's compiled through the Babel or thing, because I was looking through the inspect, and then it was just a bunch of letters, and I think that's code that is compiled after so there's the standard code from the framework that people actually coded, and then there's the code that shows up here, and the code is the compiled version. So it's much harder to understand what's going on if you're looking at the compiled version. But I think there's a way to download the library itself, and then I have access to the code of the library, and that code is probably much easier to change than to do the way that I was doing before. So I think now, but obviously I might be wrong about this, because it might be hard anyway, and I think it's going to be hard anyway if I try to implement. But maybe I don't need to, or I don't implement everything that I'm thinking about, just implement like the simplest stuff that I can first. I think that's what I should do. And I think for the simplest stuff, for the WebSocket, it's probably possible. Like I can see a path in my mind to do that. The other stuff is the one that it gets complicated, I think, with changing the physics simulation. The web scraping thing sounds very complicated as well, and the machine learning also. But changing the physics, I think, can get complicated, and then also manipulating all of this stuff here, it might be complicated as well. So that's where I'm not 100% sure if I'm gonna, but I think up to the WebSocket it's probably possible to do it, and not very difficult. However, React's virtual DOM implementation is different from Vue.js, since it uses a different algorithm to identify and update only the parts of the UI that have changed. In terms of memory management, all the three frameworks have different approaches. Vue.js and React both use garbage collection to manage memory, which means that objects that are no longer in use are automatically removed from the memory. Svelte, on the other hand, uses a technique called incremental DOM hydration, which allows Svelte to reuse existing DOM nodes rather than creating new ones, reducing the amount of memory required. This has been how does the canvas work under the hood? What happens in the browser and if the memory as the canvas gets updated. Allows developers to draw graphs, animations, blah blah blah. In the hood, the canvas element is implemented as an HTML element that is rendered as a bitmap image in the browser. When the canvas is first created, the browser allocates memory to store the pixels that make up the canvas image. The size of this memory depends on the dimensions of the canvas and the number of pixels it contains. When JavaScript code is executed to draw on the canvas, it updates the pixel values in the canvas memory. The browser then uses this updated memory to repaint the canvas on the screen. This process happens at a rate typically 6 times per second or faster to create smooth animations and interactive graphics. As the canvas is updated, the browser manages the memory used by the canvas image. New pixels are added or updated, the browser updates the memory to reflect these changes. When pixels are removed, the browser marks the corresponding memory as free and may release it back to the operating system for use by other applications. It's worth noting that the memory management in the browser can be complex and can vary between different browsers and platforms. It's important to write efficient codes when working with the canvas, blah blah blah. Yeah. How is the canvas connected? The hydration happens. I don't remember really well which one. I think is, I don't know. Is this Val? No, it's Vue.js and React have hydration. And is Vault is the other technique. Maybe is Vault is the one. Yeah, Svelte uses hydration. Incremental DOM hydration. But I think React, I've seen this term before with React hydration. Existing DOM nodes rather than creating new ones, addressing the memory. And then I'll ask about the Vue.js. I want to understand which one is going to be easier to... Maybe I should ask about the libraries as well for both of them. Like which one is going to be the easiest to build stuff with the canvas, Svelte or Vue.js? Whatever one is easiest is the one that I'm going to choose. And then I have to learn, obviously, how... Which I think it shouldn't be that difficult, I think. Because it's going to be similar to the other ones, just the syntax is going to change. Svelte's incremental DOM hydration technique is a way of optimizing updates to the DOM by selectively updating only the parts of the page that have changed. This approach is different from the virtual DOM used by many other frameworks, including React and Vue.js. While the canvas element is not a part of the DOM, it can be affected by updates to other parts of the page. For example, if a component in the Svelte application modifies data that affects the canvas may need to be updated to reflect the new state. When Svelte updates the DOM, it does so incrementally by selectively updating only the parts of the DOM that have changed. This process involves creating a patch object that contains instructions for updating the DOM. Svelte applies these patches to the existing DOM to make the necessary changes. When it comes to the canvas element, Svelte's approach to updating the DOM has no direct effect on the canvas. However, if a component modifies data that affects the canvas, the component can use JavaScript code to update the canvas directly. This may involve clearing the canvas and redrawing its content based on the new data. Since the canvas is not part of the DOM, it is not affected by Sveilt's incremental DOM hydration technique. However, the performance benefits of this technique can still be important for optimizing blah blah. I didn't put the timer. I think I'm gonna spend more time today, but I'm gonna take breaks in between, I think. I think the optimal amount of time is probably 2 hours, around 2 hours or 1 hour and a half, to go without any interruption. And after that, you start declining, but obviously it depends. I think it's related to the flow state, I think, which is related to the biochemistry in your brain. And it's very subjective because it's connected to like the experience of the abstraction that makes up your identity, which is a very weird thing to think about. Like the chemicals in your brain, which are and in your body, which are the electromagnetic field of your biochemistry, create this informational field, which is in another dimension, and that creates the feedback loop system of your identity. I think that's the relationship between the electromagnetic field and space-time. That's why, like, the identity is an informational structure, which is a hologram and a self-fulfilling prophecy. That is the multifractal paradox, because it is the bridge between space-time and electromagnetic field that creates the multifractal boundary, which is the relativistic distinctions. That is the essence of geometry. And that's why I think science doesn't get there, and that's why that's what the bridge between the symmetry of spirituality and science was. And the key is gravity, because the gravity is the frequency of awareness. So you can't get there through science because of quantum mechanics. It's the Schrödinger thing. Sveilт and Vue.js both have their strengths when it comes to handling data related to the canvas. Sveilt's approach to updating the DOM, including the canvas elements, is highly optimized and can result in better performance compared to other frameworks. Generates highly optimized JavaScript code that can result in similar bundle sizes and faster runtime performance. Vue.js also has good performance when it comes to handling data related to the canvas. Vue.js uses a virtual DOM. It sounds like Sveilt is better based on these descriptions here. In terms of libraries for dealing with canvas and graphs, there are several popular options for both Sveilt and Vue.js. For Sveilt, D3.js is a powerful library for data visualization that includes support for creating graphs and charts on the canvas element. A library for creating hand-drawn sketches. Combo.js, a library for creating complex 2D and 3D animations on the canvas elements, can be useful for creating interactive graphs. Which one of the libraries mentioned is more similar to Vue.js to create network graphs of nodes that interact with I think I'm gonna do it with Sveilt and then try to use Vue.js or D3. I think I remember using something similar to D3 some time ago. It's kind of like very similar to Python. where you chain methods, I think, but I don't remember really well. Yeah, Vue tree, not D tree. So it's different than D tree. So it seems Svelte is better for the canvas, but then Vue.js is more similar to Vue.js. Has the library that is more similar. Since Vue.js is a JavaScript library that can be used in a JavaScript project. I think the phrase of the question is not very good here. Because I don't want to know if it's possible. I want to know like how easy it's gonna be to integrate. Because I think you can use any library, any JavaScript library in any framework. But then it's a matter of if other people have built stuff that is gonna make it easier to integrate with the framework, I think. It's possible to use Vue.js as well. It's file, blah, blah, blah. Each framework is better for handling WebSockets connection. What are I think my intuition says to choose Svelte, so I'm gonna do Svelte. The other thing that I have to think about is where I'm gonna put this stuff. Whether I'm not gonna do it, because originally I was thinking about just doing a small thing to put some functions here or some other stuff and then just visualize. But if I'm gonna create the website, like what I'm always trying to do is just to keep as simple as possible. Like it gets very annoying the more files and folders you get, because it gets really confusing to navigate. So obviously we're trying to simplify as much as possible and only add complexity when it's necessary. I think that's a good way to think about it. So like what I don't want to do is just put a bunch of files. Like I want to have the least amount of files as possible. Not sure if I should create, but obviously some of this stuff is inevitable. So I think maybe what I have here, like, is gonna be, I wanna need all these files that I have here, and it's not that much, so I think I'll probably create here on this folder, and then I'll just change the name of the folder from Recursion Study to the website. The way that I did on the other one, I think that is an example of what I'm trying to avoid, which is just show many things, because I think that I lacked, because obviously I didn't know what I was gonna do here, like it evolved like that. So that's the thing. It also gets like very convoluted, let's say, because you have the two different frameworks. You have the Flask and the front-end framework, and then it gets a bunch of files. But here I have like a bunch of different files that are not related, and it's kind of confusing to think about. So I need to think about like the structure of the thing, how to put each thing. I think what I'm gonna do is probably just create a backend folder, and then put all this stuff on the backend, and then the front-end folder, and then put the Svelte stuff on the front-end. That's what I did on the other projects that I made as well. And then change the name of the main thing. And then here I create a Flask application. And then the question is, where do I put these files here for creating the graph? I think the graphs are probably going to be on the templates instead of the graph folder. But that's the thing, because I'm not going to do the graphs. I don't want to do the graphs like this. That's the thing. So I have to figure out first how I'm going to build the graphs. It's probably going to build the graphs on real time. And if possible, I want to avoid creating the file for the graph. I want to create the graph as it runs here, like I step through. So this is where it gets complicated as well, because then I need to figure out if I can put inputs here. Because what I'm trying to create is a debugger, so it has to go into steps. So it has to stop the execution here, and then send the data, and then the data updates the graph, and then only as you step through the thing, it updates the graph. So I don't want to create the file, like create the graph first and then create the file. I want to create the graph as I update the browser, and then I don't save the file anywhere. And each time, and then obviously if I want, I can create the cache to hold the files. But the problem with creating the files is that I don't think I can host on Vercel if I have to create the graph each time, because obviously then someone can create a bunch of different graphs. But I'm not really sure. I'm probably not gonna make at least in the beginning, I'm not gonna make it possible for people to. I think it's better to structure the things in a way in the beginning where I just have like standard graphs. So maybe it is better to save the graph somewhere, or maybe I'll create first like just for myself so I can use locally, and then I'll think about like how to host everything. But I think it matters, like thinking about this, because obviously then, depending on the way that I structure things in the beginning, it becomes easier to translate into the other one. And I don't want to make a bunch of different files, and it gets very confusing very fast. I think I'm going to create it on this folder. I'm just going to rename the folder. And what can be the name? I just put visualization for now, but I'll probably change later. And I have to close the folder. And then here I created a backend, and then I'm gonna append, I'm gonna pass all this stuff to the backend. And I think I'm gonna create the Flask website here. I'm gonna create the Svelte thing first, I think. So the here front ends, and it's gonna create a folder. Or maybe I can delete this and then just open, instead of creating my app, create front end. I think it's better probably. I'm gonna look into ChatGPT. Start a project with Svelte for your specific use case of creating a network X graph from a Python stack trace and displaying it in real time with Svelte. Set up Python backend server that generates networks graph from the stack trace and establishes a WebSocket connection with the front end. That's another question. Which one should I do first? The backend or the front end? I think I'm not going to change that much the code that I have here. I think about later, the one for creating the graph, because I think that's good enough. Like for before, I want to have the whole thing before I start increasing the complexity of the information that I add here, because I think the structure is probably maybe it's not. I think it's close, very close to what I want it to be, which is just representing the like what's happening on the stack of each thing, and then the rest is just gonna be like what I talked about before, where this is the fundamental part, and then the rest is just it's gonna change the nuance depending on the script, and then there are several optimizations I could probably do based on that. And then there's also the thing that I can use several different functions, and then obviously I can, after I create several different functions, can put the options to choose what type of function you want based on the input in the front end. So there's association with the way that you are creating the connections of memory, which depend on the data structure you're choosing to put in this function here, related to the way that the stack is. That is going to be different from depending on the use case, I think. And the other thing you should probably do is to, that's the thing I'm not sure. And that's the reason why I said that I should probably start being more comfortable with using Git, because like a lot of times I just end up leaving a bunch of code here, and I don't want to delete the code because I'm not really sure if I'm going to use it or not later. And then for this kind of stuff, is very good to just use the Git, because then you can create multiple different benches and then you can delete the code. So I should probably do that as well. But I think I'm going to do that once I have everything. Like once I have the whole structure, the Flask and the Svelte, at least the beginning. And then I create the repository from the top level, I think. Because it's really annoying to do with the Git stuff when you have to change a bunch of things. Or change the level that you made the thing. Yeah, but I think I'm gonna delete this stuff for now. Like it's not that hard to. You can just look it up, and it's just getting from the frame object. You get the locals and globals, and then the loop, because they're a dictionary, and then you add the nodes based on that. What I'm probably gonna do if I'm gonna add the information, I think, eventually, but I add here based on the current frame. Just create a dictionary that associates them, and then based on the flow here, I add the information there for a different visualization. But I think I'm more curious first on the WebSocket connection. I think that's the first thing that I have to focus on. Because I'm not 100% sure how to do that. Because that's the part there's a lot of uncertainty for me, because I don't understand really well. Like at each time that this function, like if it is even possible, what I was thinking about is putting the WebSocket connection inside of this function. And that's the way that I think I should do it, because like when it reaches this function, I need to put some logic that is going to stop the code. Maybe some async function or something like that, where like it creates a loop that waits for the execution, and then in the loop, then I can create a WebSocket connection. And then from the WebSocket, I send the data to the front end. So like I would have to stop the code here, then send the thing to the front end, and then create this communication between front end and back end here. And then with that data, then I create the graph on the front end. But I'm not 100% sure if it is possible to do that like inside of this function, because I don't understand really well how this trace function works. I think I do understand it, but not the the nuances under the hood, I think. This is a problem. So why is giving me this? It's just because I moved the thing, maybe? I think is VM scripts, something like that. Then activates. Then maybe I think is the problem is VS Code because I changed the thing, so the interpreter. Enter interpreter path. There we go. And now maybe if I close this open, it's gonna open. It's gonna activate the virtual environment. So I think I'll do the front end first. Just because I don't know. Maybe you should follow what ChatGPT is saying here. WebSocket is autobahn or tornado in usage to establish the WebSocket connection to the front end. You will need to handle sending the data over the WebSocket connection to the front end. Setup place Vault front end application that displays the network X graph and receives updates in real time over the WebSocket connection. Choose a WebSocket library or module for Vault, such as Vault WebSocket, Vault Auto Destroy, or Vault Observable, and use it. So this is other questions that I should probably write down here because I need to know later which one I'm going to choose and what are the trade-offs between them. I'm gonna do this all today, if possible. Use charting libraries such as Viz Network, D3JS. This is another thing. I'm probably gonna use Viz.js just because it's the one that I'm most familiar with. Integrate the backend and the front end together by configuring the WebSocket connection on both sides and ensuring that the data is sent and received correctly. Manage to adjust the backend code to ensure that the graph data is sent in a format that can be easily consumed by the developed front end. Test the application to ensure that the WebSocket connection is established and that the network X graph is displayed and updated in real time as expected. Overall, starting a project with Svelte for your specific use case will require some familiarity with both Python and Svelte. Which one is better? Should I start building the backend or the front end? One. And why? Okay, so I'm gonna start with the backend just because it says that and trust ChatGPT. Obviously, I don't know anything about Svelte because I never use this, so I'm gonna have to learn this as well. But people say that it's easier than React, I think, so it shouldn't be that difficult, I think, to learn. So it's very similar. This is the Jinja true template syntax is also similar to this, but it uses true curly braces instead of one, which put variables. I'm interested in if they have any recommendation when it comes to the software design. But obviously it's going to depend on the project, but because usually in React, I think that you have the pattern where you have the pages. In Next.js, you have the pages and then you have components. That's usually how it's done, I think. And then you may have some utils file or something like that. But it's usually components and then pages, and then you put the components inside of the pages, and that's how the data flows. So I wanna know like how that works on the Svouts. Also the CSS frameworks as well. I think I'll be right back. Back. Oh, so it's very similar. Are you using a component? I remember seeing a video, I think, from Theo, where he talks about this Vite thing. I'm not sure if it's good or bad. I don't remember. It was talking about React, and something about React, and then talking about this library, or this, whatever this is. But I don't remember if he thinks it's good or not. Maybe I should watch the video again. But I think if I'm gonna use vaults, there's no other way, I think. In that they use this stuff. Let's start with the Flask thing. And this is the Stack Overflow answer. Should we solve the thing? The path. I'm gonna close this stuff here. Might have to use this later. One reason to start with the backend is that it is responsible for generating the data that the front end will display, so it's important to ensure that this data is being generated correctly on the presentation layer. By starting with the backend, you can work on establishing the WebSocket connection and generating the network access graph, the stack trace, and ensure that the data is being sent to the front end in the correct format. One reason to start with the backend is that it can be easier to develop and test it in isolation from the front end by building out the backend first. A simple WebSocket server and client, and test this data transmission and processing logic in isolation. Help you to identify and resolve any issues with the WebSocket connection or data transmission before adding the front end into the mix. That makes a lot of sense. Finally, starting with the backend can provide a clearer sense of overall project architecture and requirements to help you guide the development on the front end. Once the backend is established and the data is being transmitted over the WebSocket connection, you can start to think about how the front end, assuming blah blah blah. Overall, how would you start the Flask backend project? What software design would you choose? I think I'm gonna ask, first I'm gonna build everything, the starting thing, then I'm gonna ask about the WebSockets libraries for Flask. The model would be responsible for generating the network graph from the stack trace, while the view would handle the transmitting the graph data over the WebSocket connection. Flow would be responsible for coordinating the interaction between the model and the view, and for handling any necessary business logic. In terms of the actual implementation, we could structure the backend code as follows. This file would define the Flask application and WebSocket route renderer, will be responsible for establishing the WebSocket connection with the front end and coordinating interactions between the model and the view. Model.py, this file would define the model, which would be responsible for generating the network X graph from the stack trace. We use the network X library to create the graph. So the one that I have is the model. It makes a lot of sense. Everything that it's saying. So I'm just gonna follow whatever it's saying. Because I think it is correct. I remember studying this in the past as well. So there's the bridge between the two, which is the controller. Then you have the model, which handles the creation of the graph, and the view that sends the data to the front end. This file would define the view, which would be responsible for transmitting the graph to serialize the data. TOSPy, this file could define any utility functions or helper classes that are used throughout the application. So I think I'm gonna take this step by step here, and I'm gonna put it on another file, and I'm gonna ask questions like step by step, based on the steps he gave here, how it would do everything, so I don't have to look at the documentation. And then I'm just gonna follow whatever it says if I think it makes sense. Oh, which we'll do a step number one. It should be much easier to do everything with ChatGPT as well. I already did all of this stuff. Hmm. This is an issue with the virtual environment. Maybe it's because of the level, but you should just get the path from here. That's the thing that I don't understand. It's saying that it doesn't find this file here. It's not finding pip. Scripts Python X. Yeah, scripts pip X. Also, we just use ChatGPT to debug this stuff as well. It's saying that it doesn't find this file. It's clearly here. Let's try this one. Yeah. Hmm. I think I need to put the path of the file. It doesn't work. Hmm. The thing is that the virtual environment is already activated, but I don't understand why it's not finding the... Maybe it doesn't find the pip path, and maybe it doesn't find the Python path, but from the command here, it looks like it is calling the Python and then executing pip. Find the file specified. So I don't know which file. I'm gonna copy this command here. I'll try to... I can try to open from a different directory as well. Just see if it's gonna work or not. I think it might be because I initialized the virtual environment on another folder, like on the top folder, and then I moved everything to the backend. So even though I set up here to the new path, for some reason it doesn't... because the way that it was initialized, it searches for the wrong path when trying to activate pip. I think that this might be the problem, but I don't know how to fix it. Maybe I should just delete the virtual environment and then install it again. But this is exactly the same kind of errors that I get when using Git, but that is very annoying. Obviously, deleting the thing is not the best approach, but then it's very annoying to deal with these kinds of things because it's just a problem that it doesn't have anything to do with what you're trying to do. So usually the easiest way is just to delete and then install again, but obviously it's not the best way to approach. Because if you have a project where you can't delete for whatever reason, then you can't resort through the solution. And then to solve this, I'm probably gonna have to spend a bunch of time researching how the executables work and how it is constructed and everything like that. The other thing I can do is just do the commands directly instead of using... I'll try this one. Maybe that should be like this. Oh, backends. There we go. I think it is a problem, the thing that I talked about, where I just moved because I created the virtual environment in a different directory, and then I moved later. Then you can't really find. But now, like, how the fuck do I fix this? That's a problem. Because the issue is I have the executable, so I can't really open the file just see what's going on. Or I have to use something that decompiles like the binary, reverses engineer the binary, and that then I can see how it works, like how it's working from the file system. Is probably using some code that communicates with the operational system to find whatever the file is. But then because it's in a executable, I can't really look into the code. And that's why these kinds of problems are very annoying, because then I have to spend a bunch of time searching all this bullshit. That doesn't matter for the project that I'm doing. So I think I'm probably gonna just delete this stuff and then make it again. Obviously not the best. Yeah, but because I'm using Python, like that's the thing. I use Python, so it installed, but it installed in a different one, I think, because it probably installed the installed Flask from the Python interpreter that is configured in my path. So it's not installing on the virtual environment, I think. But I guess what I could do is just use the path for the thing, but I think it didn't work. I tried that. Then it is annoying because every time I'm gonna run, I have to do the same this thing here. Let's put the path and then Python.x and then put the path for the pip. Not sure if this is gonna work either. I have to use the yeah, there we go. I think this is from the previous command. So if I hard code this thing here, it works, but the VS Code, when I run, oh, it actually runs the file. And the problem is when I just do pip install, that's the problem. Because it doesn't find the thing. And I retrograde process. Oh, it's because of the folder. I renamed the folder. That's why. So here is going from recursion study. But this folder doesn't exist. And then the other one uses visualization. So the pip is working from the Python executable is working from the directory where it was created, the virtual environment was created, but I changed the name so it doesn't know. That's the problem. How the fuck do I change this? Maybe I can ask ChatGPT, or maybe I can just delete and then build a new one. And then this is from the network X. That's not getting the correct working directory. Oh, it's because of the way that I'm passing here. index HTML. Maybe I should pass the absolute path. Just use the OS library to get the path. Oh, I also created another thing here. I think I'm gonna delete this. I think once I run this is because it's running from the parent. It's the same problem with the virtual environment, I think. Because I'm running the Python executable from a different place, and that's why it doesn't find the path. And it's because I changed the name and the structure of the folder from the place where I created the virtual environment. Oh, let's see. I think I'm gonna try to solve with ChatGPT. If it doesn't work, I just create a new environment. Just delete and create a new one. I think I already did the second option there. Python path. I guess Control Shift P. Open this thing. It's telling me to update the path to the interpreter, but I think I already did this. Just when you Control Shift P and then Python interpreter. Python select interpreter. I already did this. So I'm not sure if the problem is with VS Code or if it is on the virtual environment with the Python file. And it's also creating this lib file here, which is wrong. I should delete this thing here. It's not gonna work. And it still says the same thing because it's the wrong path. So I think the problem is probably on the Python file, like the actual executable. So I think the best question is how do you change the path in the executable? So I think it's the path of the virtual environment, the actual folder. I have to call Python first. The thing is that the virtual environment is already active here, activated, so. Oh, it's the bin folder. Where is this? Scripts. There isn't a bin folder. Oh, so I can open the file. Ah, interesting. So now it should work. I didn't know I can change the bat file. Maybe now it works. Oh, like I wonder if I have to. I think, but this is not gonna work. I have to put the path and then deactivate. But I'm not sure if I need to deactivate and activate again to work. It still doesn't work. It's not gonna probably not gonna change anything if I just close. Maybe I'll have to deactivate, run the deactivate bats thing. Why is not activating? Oh, there we go. It's still the same. Because I think it's not using the bats. Maybe it's using this file. Or this one. This one opens. There we go. So just gonna change on as many files as I can because I think I'm using this one. So changing this one is probably gonna work. And this one is also incorrect because I'm not putting the backend here. Yeah, but I'm probably using this one. So now, let me see if I can deactivate this. It runs, but it doesn't deactivate. Oh, I think it's PS1 because it's PowerShell. And it doesn't have deactivate here. Let's try the bats thing. I think I'm just gonna ask to ChatGPT. Yeah, doesn't work. But I think changing the environment here should work, changing the path. I didn't know I could open these files. But I forgot that these ones are not executables. So probably changing all of them, the path, because then it doesn't matter which one I'm using. So I just have to deactivate and then activate again, I think. So let me... Oh fuck, I'm gonna lose the context. Yeah, GG. Thankfully I wrote down the stuff here though, so it doesn't matter. You just recreate the context as well. It's not that big of a deal, I think. I think virtual env deactivate maybe. And create another folder. That doesn't work. Maybe virtual env is just to create the environment. Then creates with whatever name you put there. So let me think. Oh. I do this thing again. Maybe it's because it changed here. Oh no, just the file. When I change the file, it changes the thing here because it's I still from the other folder. Ctrl Shift, blah blah blah. So just deactivate should work. First I'm gonna try again without deactivating, and then I'll try. Yeah, there we go. So now it should work. Why is it still the same? So maybe I'm changing the wrong file. It should be this one though, this activate one, because it's the only one that doesn't have an extension there. And that's the one that I'm calling to activate. So I think it should be this file here that I'm using. I think I'm gonna close this one. And this one is getting the path using OS. I think it should be this one. So, but here I can see that I'm getting recursion study. So it didn't change. It didn't update the path. Bash. Yeah, but this is a bash. It's not gonna work, I think. Yeah. Let me try to put it specific. But I tried this and it doesn't work. Oh, now it works. So blah blah. The question is, how do I print this? It's getting the path from here, I think. But I don't understand why it has the old name. So ChatGPT again. Oh, it's back. No. I am on the backend. VM scripts. Activate .ps1. What is wrong? Okay. I made some mistake there. I'm still getting this path, so I assume that it was something that was set as a variable the moment I created this. And this is the command that is doing this, so I want to see how to change. Is this path, where does this come from? I can't use the... Because this is the path that is getting. It's getting this from this my invocation command. The path that was probably set when the virtual environment was initialized. Probably through this env path here. So maybe what I should be asking is how to set the env path. Should update the env path in PowerShell. It comes from the base there, which comes from this thing. Let's try this. And the thing is, yeah, obviously I don't know if I'm, because I don't understand the command here. I'm doing this correctly. And the problem is that I think it doesn't get to that point. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, there it has to be everything ran from this file. Let me try this script. This doesn't work. Yeah, because it has to be equal. And then this has to be a $sign. But I think that the command should be just a command because of the way that it is here. And it shouldn't be equal as well. So I'm not sure why it's not printing there. When I do the command here. If I do Python or something like that. Yeah, Python command works, just to pip that doesn't. And I'll get out this shit. Maybe it's quit. Oh, fuck. Oh, there we go. Oh, maybe I need to write this stuff here. Hmm. It will display the current value of, if the path is incorrect, you can update this path variable to a new path by assigning it a new value using set variable command line. Yeah, let's try this. But I'm not sure if that's... But I think it doesn't matter because I can just change if it isn't. Just have to see... So maybe deactivate again and then activate. And now it's showing the current path. Let's see. I did all this stuff. It's still the old one though. What's going on? Or maybe it's because I didn't... No, I did save here. Yeah, so the virtual environment should be the one on top of the script. The one that I have to update here. The wrong file, I think. Don't. But it's not. That's not the problem because it's still getting the wrong thing there. But I think I need to run the command again, and maybe I need to run with the virtual environment deactivated. But I need to put the path up until the script because it's gonna be from this point here, I think. Let's deactivate. Then I run this thing again. And I activate again and try. It's still the old name though. It's very weird. Maybe I'm like the thing is I have to be changing the correct one, but maybe it's probably the command that is wrong. So I need to understand better how to change this, what this command does. I should just. Alright, I think I can't print this. It doesn't show anything. Remove the script for your new location and you should update the value to reflect the new location. Can you split path and join path? New path based on the current location of the script. I think this doesn't work. Maybe I'm spending too much time on this is not worth it. Just better to. I think I can solve it, but just the problem is in this file here. You need to change this path here so figure out a way to update this path so that it uses the new path instead of the old one. I think this command creates a environment variable or something like that in the moment that it creates the virtual environment, and then it registers that path because this is what this command does. So I would need to figure out how to change the path that was created in the beginning the environment variable, and then once you change that, it's going to use the new path. Because that's the path that is using to locate, and that's the reason why it is incorrect here. But it might be just be better to and easier to just delete this stuff and start again. Delete the virtual environment. I'm probably gonna do. But it's still interesting to look into. So I don't know. I think I'm gonna take a break soon, and then I'll think about whether or not. Yeah, it's 3 minutes for 1 hour and a half. Whether or not to delete this and start again, or just figure out how to change. The other thing that I can do is just hard code the path here. I think this is probably gonna work, but it's not the best. Because then it's obviously like a duct tape solution. And something like this, I think. But I think I can use this to try to test. Visualization. So this is the wrong thing, I think. I think I'm thinking about the wrong. It's probably something else that I have to change here inside of this script. Because now it's showing visualization there, not virtual environment. Or maybe I put the wrong file or the wrong path. Huh, there you go. So I think now it is working, but then it is duct tape because I'm using the path, hard-coded path. And it's showing visualization here instead of VM. So the question is, do I leave it like this, or do I delete and do it again? Or do I figure out how to change the... I think I'm gonna spend some time trying to see how to change this command so that it updates the path. Like what command to use here to update, and why this command doesn't update. But I might just delete as well, so I can start working on the actual thing that matters, which is creating the thing. This object contains a variety of properties that you can use to get information about the current invocation, such as the command line argument that were passed to the script, the name and path of the script file. Here's an example of how my invocation object gets information about the script. When you run this code, does it set any environment variables? The first time that it is run. I'm not sure if that's the passive run. I'll be right back. I'm going to read some stuff while I watch videos about PowerShell. Then I'll continue to do the stuff. This is what I don't understand. If it is getting the current invocation, then how does it get to the wrong path? It's probably at some other point, but then how does it work if I change this to the hard code starts working? So like, I don't understand. Because this should set the variable for the path. So this is the command that is setting the path, but then like if it is not created at the moment that I create the virtual environment, then how does it give the wrong path? It should give the correct one. When it replaces here and then uses the commands to get the environment that Python is at, or pip is at. And then it uses this place to run the rest of to run the commands. Because this is the virtual environment, and then is used here on the path. So I think I'm just gonna search for this on YouTube and watch videos about this. Because I think what is happening is that it sets some environment variable or something when the first time that it is ran, and then it uses that like something like a cache or something like that. And then from that point, it always got that place. So what I have to do is change that so that I think what I'm gonna do is just delete, because I just spent too much time on this already. I'm just gonna eat this stuff, and then after I eat, I'm gonna delete this, and then I'm gonna continue through the actual thing that matters. Because I think I'm already satisfied with, because now I understand better how it works there. So like in case I ran into a situation where I can't delete for whatever reason, then I know at least a quick fix that I can do. And then if I get to that situation, then I can just investigate further, I think. But it's not worth it to spend a lot more time on this now, so. Yeah, I'm gonna watch one of these videos, and then I'll eat something, and then after I do that, I'm gonna delete the virtual environment, create a new one, and then start installing everything that I need and building the Flask backend on the WebSocket.
So, yeah, I'm Dakota Clark. I'm a product expert at PDQ.com, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about a different format of logging that you all might be used to. So usually traditional logging, you can go ahead and output something to the console, which is useful in an interactive scenario, or if you have something that captures the output of the PowerShell window. Beyond that, you can write to a file that has a bit more of a persistence to it. It'll stay on the file system as long as it's not deleted or overwritten. You can also write to a file share, which is a bit more of a central location. So if you need to go ahead and access it from a bunch of different places, you have one place to put it. Also, like a syslog server, if you want to go ahead and send that off one application with that. But things like these are kind of a pain at cloud scale. In order to do these things in Azure, it's kind of hard and not necessarily easy to go ahead and maintain. So there's something called application performance management, or APM. This is something that you'll commonly see developers use to go ahead and track the performance and the different actions that their code is taking as it's executed. So to give you a comparison with traditional systems monitoring, something we're all used to, in code monitoring,
Hello, guys, and welcome. This is Jim Tyler from PowerShellEngineer.com here today to try to teach you PowerShell as quick as we can, hopefully under an hour. I think it's possible. We'll see, whatever the title says, right? Yeah, so I'm hoping to be able to go through that really quickly with you guys. Just a quick background, super quick background on myself. I'm a former Amazon engineer. I've got a Master's of Science in Information Systems. I'm currently a K-12 Director of Technology for a public school district in Michigan, and I'm just a huge PowerShell fanatic. Recently, I gave a couple presentations at a statewide conference on PowerShell, notably wearing a PowerShell shirt. You can follow me on Twitter at PowerShellEng. And stay in touch. And then also please subscribe to my newsletter, jimtyler.substack.com, entitled PowerShell Engineer. If you want to see some tips and tricks that I'm sharing out to you guys, that is a 100% free newsletter. So let's jump right in.
Good morning, welcome to the Microsoft Virtual Academy. And this is a special Virtual Academy jumpstart of getting started with PowerShell. It's going to be the best one ever. Of getting started with PowerShell. Whether you're an IT pro or even a dev, this is the strongest, most powerful management tool you have in your arsenal to take control of your network. And we're going to take you through today step by step. And when I say we, well, it's a very special training event today. I'm Jason Helmick, but this is the inventor of PowerShell, distinguished engineer Jeffrey Snover. And this is going to be a great event for all of us today. We're going to take you through step by step on how to get started working with PowerShell. And who better to learn from than Jeffrey Snover? So I think let's start out with some intros. I'll flip a little slide thing.
Okay. Yeah, so howdy, I'm Jeffrey Snover. I'm a distinguished engineer, and let's see, so I started off the PowerShell team about 12 years ago, maybe a little more, and that worked out pretty well because after having shipped a couple versions, they made me a distinguished engineer and then the lead architect for Windows Server 2012. Awesome. That worked out pretty well, so now I'm the lead architect for Windows Server and System Center Data Center products, so having some fun.
Oh boy, having a lot of fun. And with PowerShell, and we're going to talk about Windows Management Framework, all this bundled together, not just in Server 2012, but it works all the way backwards to 2003, so that we can do all this management with everything we have in our environment, not just necessarily the latest and greatest.
That's the plan. Back to filling up your arsenal. I like that term.
I like that term too. That's turned out pretty good. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Jason Helmick. I work with Concentrated Technologies. I do this for a living. I love to train. I do PowerShell. I also work as an engineer and consultant, mainly doing a lot of automation with it. Author of a new book that's coming out, Learn Windows IIS in a month of lunch. Tough title to say. It's not only about learning IIS, but it's using PowerShell for it. So just some interesting little tidbits about me. Truly, what the best thing to know about me is I get to sit next to him. So let's do this. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let's start off with showing what we're going to talk about today. So as you can see from the agenda, we're going to cover several topics today, and it's actually quite a few of them. I'm going to start off with one of my favorite ones, which is don't fear to show. You know, I think a lot of IT guys when they first get started with this, I hear this all the time. They're scared. They have to get started with PowerShell. They're not used to command line. They don't say they're scared, but they're not used to using the command line.
Deep down, they see that console window and they just like,
I don't know what to do.
yeah,
So one of the first things we're going to do is get rid of some of that fear, show you how straightforward you can get started with PowerShell, and then we're going to take you into what PowerShell starts to look like. And of course, we're going to talk about the reasons why PowerShell even exists, and there's some incredibly important ones. So we'll also get into the help system, probably one of the most important things that we do today, the pipeline and extending the shell. All of this stuff that we're going to do is going to make more sense as we get looking at what objects are and drilling into the pipeline. What is that weird character I keep seeing between these commands? And we'll get into one of the most important advantages that you have, which will be PowerShell remoting, which will let you do a lot of your stuff in scale.
that's where it gets fun.
That's where it really gets fun.
By the way, so people should be doing this exercise with us. So you should get your computer, fire up a PowerShell window, and type along with us. That's the way you get the most out of this course.
And actually, I think that's the best way to get the most out of this. Is I know you want to kick back and kind of sit some coffee or whatever and listen to us, but keep your fingers close to that keyboard in the console in PowerShell so you can work with us on this.
And should we join you? You're talking about the Q&A?
Yeah, I got a slide coming up. Oh, here, this is the expectations things on our target audience, and then we'll talk about how to join us. This was designed for IT pros. However, if you're dev, please join us on this. This was designed for IT pros to be a quick deep dive and get started with PowerShell. There's so many guys out there right now and gals that are trying to get started with PowerShell, and sometimes find it really difficult. Well, this is the idea, is to get you through the difficult. And we're not just doing it at introductory level. We're going to go in pretty deep with using PowerShell, and it doesn't matter what product you want to use it with. When you use Active Directory, SharePoint, you got to know the tool. If you know the tool, then the products are easy to deal with. So if you're an IT pro, if you're working help desk, if you're a developer interested in what PowerShell can do for you, this is the place to be. And as a couple of additional resources, first of all, we have chat available. If you're all in on chat, you can chat us questions, and I'll constantly be reminding you to chat in questions. We have an amazing support staff out there today. A lot of the PowerShell MVPs are joining us today. They help answer questions, and we'll be out there answering questions. So we want you to join in and contribute and ask whatever questions you have, and we'll do that we can. Make sure you all get an answer to it.
Yeah, the PowerShell community is blessed with some fantastic MVPs, a number of which are online, and they'll be coming going throughout the day. So don't hesitate to ask questions. You get some rock stars out there.
You certainly do. And I also want to keep in mind that this particular virtual academy, we're going to have a second session, not the same thing. We're going to be beyond this session, further and further into scripting and toolmaking here in just a couple weeks on August 1st, right?
Yep.
It's going to be August 1st. So you want to join the MBA community. As a matter of fact, you can join the MBA community. Get signed in online as you go through the videos that are available out there. You get points, and for right now, you can get 50 special MBA points if you put in the code that's at the bottom of the screen. So make sure you keep track of what's going on with the MBA community so that you can get more sessions just like this one. I don't know. I think we're ready to get started. Let's get into this.
Favorite topic.
I know. I just love talking about this. So folks, here we go. We're going to get into don't fear the shell. Come on, you can hear me. Don't fear the shell. Okay, maybe not. Okay, we'll stop that then. So we're going to go through an overview of what PowerShell is, why it even exists. Of course, this is a great time for Jeffrey to help us understand why we even have this. And then we're going to start going into how to take some of the fear out of running PowerShell. Show you how to get it installed and how to get it set up. So let's rock and roll. First of all, the purpose of, and I just want to point out, you see this slide? Yeah, look at you guys. You see the you and the them. That picture of you, that's a picture of me when I was younger. Right? Sort of, no, it's not really a picture of me. So here's the idea. You're sitting there struggling with the day-to-day events of everything that's around you. You've got projects you have to have done. There are things that are on fire. Everything's going on. You have them. You have your end users, your boss, all these people. They're we need this now. We need this now. And in Microsoft environments, this has been a challenge. We've had some tools and you've had some scripting languages. We had VB script. But there were certain limitations that would challenge us, and it wasn't quite complete enough. It was also kind of hard. And doing automation and solving problems was a huge challenge. Then came along this product that you made. So why is it that what is it that you're trying to solve for all those guys in IT?
Yeah, when I came to the company, I said, well, you mean automation strategy? And they said, well, we have automation strategy. I said, really, where? And they said, well, here, in VB script. It's like, no, my friend, that's not automation strategy. And they said, well, here, you've got these great APIs. Like, no, my friend, that's not automation strategy. Exactly. And so what I knew was that we needed to have an interactive shell, an environment that someone would say, hey, go explore the system, try this, try that, be able to get things done. And then from there, the idea is like, hey, I know I can type things over and over again. Why don't I put it in a script and just run it from there? And then say, well, that's great. Now it's reduce my repetitive strain injury. Now I'd like to parameterize it. Oh, I'd like to parameterize it. Now I can use it for wide ranging. And now I'd like to share with you. And now we'd like to use it to manage thousands of machines. So we had this model called the admin development model, which really Bruce Payette, he says the average lifetime of a command line script or start a script starts at the prompt and ends at the carriage return. It was very important to be an interactive environment so that you can explore and honestly have fun. I mean, there's two things you get out of today's session. One is a sphere of exploration. Hey, this is a great environment to explore. And then two is how fun it is. It's just a blast to be able to use. And then from there, people automate. So about an hour later, I'm like, hey, this thing's pretty cool. And then also perform amazing things that the beginners struggle with. And the conclusion was,
at some point, you don't want to work with that data again. So if you can export it, you can import the CSV. So import CSV. There we go. And now all that data comes back and is formatted correctly into text correctly, so I can actually work with it now. Now these are simple examples of the pipeline, but we're also showing you some great export stuff. So besides exporting, like with CSV, there's my favorite. This. Command line XML. I love XML. XML is great since the automation slice spread. Great example. You guys used to do online 19 years ago. You go to you buy something, swipe your credit card. 3 days later, you show up in your account. Today you swipe it, when you show up in your account, just finish, just swipe it. It's XML, baby. It's XML. So let's export to XML. And here's what I'm going to do. Instead of doing get service, I'm going to do get process. I like that. And I'm going to make a little. I'm going to do this called this good XML. I want you to pretend something for a second. I want you to pretend that I just take a snapshot of a perfectly good running machine. It runs perfectly. And I just snapshot it. It processes. Now if you blink your eyes, pretend for a moment that now I'm working on a non-perfectly running machine. What I'd like to do is I'd like to compare the good machine to the non-good machine.
Yeah, imagine instead of notepad and calc, imagine some malware.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just using notepad. Now, the compare, I'm just giving you an example of how the pipeline using commands can be very useful to you. So I've got reference document. I'm going to use parentheses. I'm going to talk more about parentheticals. So this means do this first. So what I need to do is I need to import the good XML file that represents the good machine. And then I want to compare that to this currently running machine. Now, when you run get process, there's a lot of information that comes up. What I just want to compare the names of the processes right now and see if there's a difference. So what I've done is I exported my process information from the pipeline, and I'm just going to compare it. Notice the side indicator points to the bad machine, and it's saying, hey, look, Calc and Notepad are running on that as opposed to what's on the good machine. This is an example of how you can start to build commands with pipeline to do something, and then use other commands to achieve results. Imagine comparing two machines, the software is installed, and making one machine look just like another. So there's a lot of things that we can do with building a pipeline. One last example, let me take a
So what basically showed you is freakishly powerful, and we're going to drill into it in the future. So what we did was we took a set of live objects, and we compared them against an XML file. How do you do that? And the answer is the magic of PowerShell and things we call objects and not adders. And of course, if you just try to compare these things and say, they're completely different, so you can say, I just want to compare them based on their name. And so what you've done, okay, what you've really led you to is, again, you think about what you want to do, you type it, and the magic of PowerShell is able to take these incredibly complex stuff and present it to you in a very simple way.
So let me show you a couple of command lines, and Jerry will be adding in stuff here. Just so you get the idea of what's going on. Besides exporting out to like CSVs and XML, there's some other things you can do. So get service. Everybody wants to know how do I put something into just a text file. Well, first of all, you can found out file by looking for get help start file or something like that, which is totally awesome. And you'll find out file. Out file has, if you look at help file for it, once you get a path and you get a path which one you use as a for your text file, so test.txt. And you can get the content. Did I say get the content? You can get the content from a text file. I wonder if there's anything that can help me with getting content from a text file. Oh, look, you get content. Helps us your friend. So you can get the content from a text file by just using get content. And I'm going to get test.txt. And there's all that get service content that is in a text file. But wait, there's more. You can send stuff out to a printer, out to a printer, out printer, out printer.
So there's a set of things you can set it out to.
I wonder how we could find a list of the things that we could send stuff out to.
Yeah, no,
oh,
just
start with out. Yeah. Well, here's a ton of stuff we can send for out. So again, the help file is your friend. Besides sending stuff out, there's also creative ways to do stuff. So get service. I love this. This is one of my favorite things. We also have convert to command list. Convert to CSV. Now this will make more sense later, but well, you just have to export CSV. Yeah, and we convert to CSV. The difference being right now, when you do export CSV, you're done. You're done. When you do convert to CSV, we leave that stuff in the pipeline in case you want to pipeline and do other things to it. So
the way I think about it is export is convert coupled with public file.
Yeah, excellent. Because if you export CSV, you have mandatory you have to send it to a file. So think of it as a convert with an file, or we go right in. So we have to convert, but I want to show you one of my favorite ones. I'm going to pick just a couple of properties for this. I'm going to take name and status. The reason I knew that convert to HTML has a dash property parameter, and it had Jehovah's that would take more arguments that look at the help file. So it's going to convert to expect HTML, and it's like, there it is. It's the cleanest HTML, by the way. It did exactly what I have to do, but here's an example of me saying, look, I want to do my screen. I want it in a file. I want it out to a file, so let's type it out file. Let's call this just a test.html. And you guys know if you have any. Okay, thanks guys for telling us about that. All this beautiful glory. You guys know that if you double click, did I say double click? Yes, I said double click on HTML. We'll see. No double click, no mouse. So what I'm going to do is just say SQL and test HTML, and PowerShell will launch that for you. You get, I just made a web page. How many developers did that take? And if you look at the help for convert to HTML, you're going to find that a lot of options to make this pretty. There's a lot of ways to make this very pretty tables, all kinds of using style sheets and so forth. So it takes a look at help. This is an example of typing from one command to another to achieve a certain result. So say what else about we got the web page, and these are just some examples of typing some stuff. Oh, we're going to have to talk about stuff that kills because I almost screwed up earlier.
Yeah, it's fun.
So let me get Jerry, you can help me with this because I'm going to get service. I'm going to do stop service. I don't know if this works or not, but it seems kind of risky to me.
Yeah.
What do I do?
When in trouble, figure it out. Run circle, scream, and shout. So no, here's the thing. When you ever, so I was dealt with an admin, so now again, it's late doing something, and I realized if I take character entity, and I realized if I get run, like that's the end. Right? I'm going to be fired, Buffy, you're not going to go to college. It's just going to be bad. So what are we doing? We create an environment where somebody that's the world that they have to live with. And so in PowerShell, if you ever have something that you're uncertain of, you can always type minus wife. Like, what if I did this? What would actually happen? And you would get, and it tells you what it would do, but it doesn't actually do it.
Now, the best part is that it tells you what it would do, but it didn't actually do it. And if you look at my screen, it says, yeah, I would stop these services. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, that, oh, this is a nice shut down my computer. No. This is going to be way before it gets shut down. So it won't blue screen, but it's going to stop somewhere around PowerShell service, somewhere in there.
Buffy, you're not going to college.
So you're not going to do that. But something to keep in mind, we also, besides what if, I use what if all the time because, things can be dangerous. You're trying out. We also have dash confirm. And dash confirm is a what if with, do you actually want to do this? Now, I'm obviously not going to say yes to anything, certainly not yes to all. So let's just, I'm going to put my finger on the L right now so that nothing happens. But I want you to notice it's showing you both what it will do and then asking you, do you want to do this? People ask all the time. PowerShell doesn't ask me, are you sure? Yeah, PowerShell for 60, but sometimes you need that capability. So I'm going to hit L. And please don't actually do anything.
Yeah. Okay, so remember, so that's about this is that interesting, right? Get service, like the stop service, right? Okay, but who's going to do that? Right? You're just not going to do that, right? But remember what I said earlier, right? About this like programming with hand thing. What I said was, okay, so let's say there's this bits thing, and I don't remember what the heck it was. So what I'm going to say is display name, something to do with bits, and or maybe it was something to do with BI, right? And then stop service. Now, did I get that one right? Now this is more realistic. Did I get that one right? Because maybe BI star knows the service, and maybe it doesn't. So what you do here is you say what if? And you're like, oh, no, good thing I didn't do that. Now at this point you could go and say, okay, why did that matter? Oh, I see biometric, and oh, I see compatibility. Now, if you want to, you go here and try and like tweak this thing, right? And do this, but instead you can just say, no, it's close enough. Confirm, and you say, yeah, that's the one I want to do too. So you stop that, and then this one you say, no, that was the only one. So you say, no to the rest. And now I've stopped. GSVD. The other one. Oh, you might stop that.
Well, great example of practical use. Confirm.
I know I'm applying support policy.
There you are.
Well,
so guys, this is your first introduction to the pipeline. We're going to go much deeper into this pipeline. The concept again is you have a commandlet. You're going to pipe the results of that command to the next one. So do this, then do this, then do this, then do this until your needs are done. And what you're going to notice is as we go through this and you get more commands, you can see that the way you're thinking about solving the problem is the way that you'll actually be building the commands in the pipeline. Now, you don't have to do everything as one-liner, and one-liners are great. We do a lot of them in here. We're also going to do scripting where one-liner is when it's half the page, you probably will have control of that, but you can is the idea. Now, before we go too much further into the pipeline, Jeffrey, let's do this. I've got a slide here, so let me show you where we're at. So guys, again, make sure you ask questions like for all the people who have support, EVPs, everybody's contributing. Thank you so much for helping us out and answering all these questions that are out there. Let's go into extending the show a little bit. And this is a fascinating conversation for me because I can't remember the exact number. I think PowerShell 1 came out. I think it was 192 commands. That's all we could do was 190 things.
Yeah.
Then PowerShell 2 came out. There was 236. Well, 236 things that we could do. But we need to do more than that. I mean, we need something that's extensible so that we can. So how do we get more than just the core PowerShell command? Who's responsible for all that kind of stuff?
It takes a village, my friend. It takes a village. Exactly. So the PowerShell team is responsible for the core PowerShell environment, the language, etc. And then you have plugins, right? There are snap-ins or we now call modules. And this is where you're like, trust me, you don't want me writing the link commandlets, right? That doesn't end well. And so what we do is we create an environment where it's very easy for the individual feature teams to write their stuff and ship their stuff. And that's why when you say, oh well, I want to do some stuff with PowerShell, where's the link commandlet? What? Do you have link installed? If you don't link installed, you're not going to get the link commandlets. So the idea is that the commandlets ship with the thing that needs to be managed. And so we do this through modules. So originally there were snap-ins, right? So snap-ins, and if you got PowerShell version 1 or PowerShell version 2, you have this thing called snap-ins. Turns out there were a number of limitations with snap-ins. The biggest, you had the administrator get it installed, and something else. Oh, you can XCOM deployment. And modules now, modules is basically consider model after the module or package modules of Perl and Python and Ruby, but actually much richer than those. But the idea is you be able to package up your stuff and then XCOM deploy it, and then you import your modules.
So let's take a look. First of all, on what Jeffrey's saying is, and I think this is, you guys, all of you guys have run the MNC before. You know the MNC. You can file, add, remove, snap in, and you get a list of stuff here that you can add. I want you to notice on mine, I happen to have some of the Active Directory snap-ins. You guys know that in order to get those, I had to install something. In this case, I installed remote server administration tools to get the Active Directory ones. Well, it's the same concept when working with PowerShell. Do you have the product installed? Well, I have the remote server administration tools installed, and so I'm going to get those modules. Let me show you. PowerShell has a command called get module. This will show you what's currently loaded up. However, list available will show you the modules available. Now, I need to tell you right now, this is very confusing. In V2, in V2, first of all, you're not going to see what you're going to see on my screen. In V2, you're not going to see it in Windows 7 either. What you're seeing here is Windows 8 running the Windows 8 remote server administration tools, and I get more modules than you do.
Because he's cool.
You know, that's cool because I've upgraded. So I know what your purpose standard, you may not be doing it yet, but your admin box needs to be running v3, and as you're going to 1, it needs to be running Windows 8. Okay, so, but anyway, let me just show you. I don't know if that works for Microsoft. I don't know. So you can see I get this giant list of modules, and notice one of the modules at the very top is called Active Directory. The reason I have that module is I installed Linux or administration tools. Here's what that module contains. Commandless. Commandless that let me manage Active Directory. You have and providers. We're talking about providers. Yes, and providers. If you have a module with commandless, here's the beautiful thing about PowerShell v3. You're gonna love this. When you use get help knows how to look through those modules, even if they're not loaded. So get help. I want you to show me, do I have any Active Directory commandless? I want you to notice that, yes, there's a lot of things with AD, and I could refine the search better, but that's kind of my point, because I want you to see that there's a whole bunch of AD commandlets here. You recognize AD computer as this will give me Active Directory computers. The help system, get help knows how to look in these modules, find these commandlets to show that, so you still have complete discoverability. And when you want help on the commands you found, get help, get AD computer, it'll give you help for it. When you try to use the commandlet, this is one of the biggest features for me personally in v3 is when you try to use the commandlet, and I think I may have used this one earlier, so you may not see it flash on my screen, but take a look. Just wait, let me do this. I'm going to close my console and reopen it. I want you to see this. You can catch it on my screen real quick.
Maybe do this. Is do a get module. I'll show you. Get module.
Okay, so do get module.
Yeah, your turn. So these are the current loaded modules.
Right, these are currently loaded.
Now do it.
And now, yes, thank you. So these are currently loaded ones. Now I'm going to get AD computer. And watch what flashes across my screen real quick. It actually dynamically loaded the module for me, so that I had the commands. Notice command ran. I didn't have to do anything special. The reason I made a big deal about this, and here I'll show you. Get module. Get module. Now you see it. It automatically loaded the Active Directory module for me. The reason I made a big deal about this in v2, your life sucks. I'm sorry, sir, but in v2 this was painful. Because in v2, get help would not find commands unless the module was imported. So you had to know what the module was first, then import it, then you could discover it didn't quite work. They fixed all that in v3. Now it works just like I need it to work. And when I run the command, the module loads. So I'm not loading modules unnecessarily. And if I run a script, so it just loads what it needs, and I don't have to worry about it. It's beautiful world. You got any more modules? Because that's all about modules.
Well, you do review this now.
What do you want to do?
On just another machine.
Oh, no, we'll do it. Oh, we'll get to that later.
It's so cool. It's so cool.
It's so cool. So let me show you the slides, guys.
So that's after lunch thing.
Yeah,
Energy.
we just want right now, because we're not 30 minutes or so away from taking a meal break.
It's the international term for lunch.
Yeah, because we're taking lunch. Is that don't eat a lot because you don't want to fall asleep after lunch. That's coffee. So we got everything in slides, and PowerShell dynamically loads of modules for you, and you can discover all your commands. Thank God for v3 makes it much easier. And so you can run your commands, and off you go. Now the fun starts to begin. Before lunch, I'm sorry to do this to you. Yeah, this is great. I know this is this is great. We're going to talk about objects. We're going to talk about objects and what objects are, and I'm going to let Jeff talk about objects. See what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
so let me show you something here. So we've been lying to you. So here, we've been saying get service. Sorry. And what you see, right? What you see is text. Okay, but that's not what's really going on. What's really going on is when I get service. I didn't say get service text. I just say get service. So what I'm actually getting is I'm getting service objects, service control objects. Okay? And the point of that, don't forget the word object. Right? Some people are object. Oh yeah, like I'm not a developer. No, friends. No. Objects dramatically simplify your life. Okay. Now what is an object? Okay, let's just try to deal with that. Right? Simple. So one of the I think it was in the video, some tech guy did a great explanation of objects. Look, an object is just a thing. Right? It's a noun that has properties and methods. So think about a bicycle. Right? A bicycle is an object. And it has properties. It has handlebars. It has pedals. It has wheels. Okay? And then there's things you can do. So an object is things it has. We call those properties. It has a handlebar. It has a wheel. It has a frame. And there are things it can do. You can pedal. You can steer. And we call those things methods. So objects are merely things that have properties and things you can do things to.
Okay, I like that so far. I like that.
So here we show this thing, and what actually happens is I got a set of objects. Now what the trick is, and here's the magic is, that we spew these objects out, and we can then work on them. And when they finally get to the display says, "Oh, I got an object." What the hell am I gonna do with that? Like, there's no way I'm gonna burp out this like binary stuff. People can like, figure it out. So what the display does is it says, "Oh, now I'll convert it to an object or convert it to text." And the whole point about that is you want to delay the conversion of text as far as possible, as long as possible. Because when you get text, it's really hard to operate with. Now, if you guys know Unix, you know what I'm talking about, right? Because imagine let's go back to get process. So get process, RSS. Okay. Now imagine you want to get all those things where the handles were greater than let's say 700. Let's do this. Get process. Okay, so you see it's a bunch of these things, and some of them are high. So you want to get all those that were greater than 1,000. How do you do it? Well, in Unix, if this is text, it's text. How do you do that? Well, let's see. You got to cut off 1, 2, 3 lines, and then you got to go and you say, well, the cut from 0 to let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 characters. I got to cut these first 7 characters, and then what you get? And the answer is a string. And so how do you do a string comparison that's greater than 1,000? Well, you get 1,000. That's easy. You say, well, if the string truncates all the spaces, and then if the length is greater than 3, then it's greater than 1,000. But if you want to do it greater than 900, well, then you got some. Okay, so you know what we're going to do, guys? Hats off to you. I don't know how I can code all these years. I mean, really, we call this prayer-based parsing, right? Please work. Exactly. And not only do service work fine, but in our world, you want to do that. In our world, you have these objects. Okay. Now the thing is, when I do get process, I'm displaying an object. Each row is the object itself, and each one of these displays here, each one of these columns reflects the properties. Okay. So what did I tell you? I told you we're trying to create a world where you think about what you want, you type it, and you get it. And the way that works is because of objects. Okay. So what did I say? I said I want to get processes. I want to get those where the handle count was greater than 500. Okay. So let's say where the handles. Okay. Where are the handles? Right there. Handles. Okay. So where handles are greater than 900. Why do we work? Because of objects. Objects are cool. Now wait, so this is a little bit messy here, right? Because these handles, we look like all over the place, right? So really what I want to do is I'm going to sort it by. Now how do I again cut off 3 lines and do this and again string? But no, it's an object. So what you do is again think about what you want, type it, and you get it. You say, well, I want to sort it by handles. And then you get it.
If you're starting to get the concept, it's starting to become totally awesome. Look at the difference of working with objects. One thing that you can do to start off is to show that these are objects. I'm just going to grab service real quick. And if you want to take a look at what properties, and notice when I just get service thing, notice that there are 3 what appear to be properties displayed about this service. I'm pretty sure there's more properties than just these 3 on service. And I'm not seeing any methods here. But Jeff just said that objects have properties and they have methods. Well, there's a way to show you everything that an object has. And it's going to become a crucial part of working with PowerShell. So how do you find out what properties and methods an object has? You pipe it to a very special command. And I'm going to get member. Now I got to be honest with you. Get member. We usually use the alias for this. So I'm just going to use the alias. Pipe GM. And you go to say pipe GM. When you pipe something to get member, it takes an object and it shows you all the methods. So think of this way. It's kind of like if I were walking in front of a mirror. The mirror shows me things like, well, you're 6 foot 2 people long, you got blue eyes, you're built really well, and you got methods. You have methods like you certainly like karate. What do you think of mirror? That's possible. Yeah, obviously my mirror doesn't work well, but the PowerShell mirror being get member works very well. So let me show you. If you take a look at this, a couple pieces of information you're going to pull out from get member. First of all, what kind of object is this? This is going to be very important to us after lunch. What kind of object is this? Yeah, look at this. Woo, there we go. So system.service process. What's really interesting right now is this period comes after service control. And that's what kind of object is being sent across that pipeline. And then look at this. Anything with the word property in it. I don't even have some other word in front of there. Anything with a property is a property that you can use and look at specifically. Like everyone's doing handles on get process. Look at all these properties out there. We're going to start off working with properties, but we also have methods. Methods like, oh look, start and stop. Get service has a method to start and stop service. We don't need a command necessarily. We have a method that we can use. We'll show you how to do that too. So get member is your friend to show you the truth or what an object actually contains for its properties and its methods. Let me give you an example. Using kind of off of Jeffrey's example, I'm going to do get service. And here's what I want to do. I want to just select a couple of properties. The properties that I want to see right now are name and status. We have a command called select object. Now you usually see this as its alias of select. Let me just show you. It has a parameter called property, and you can tell me what properties you now want to see. Well, if I go to get member, I'm going to list the properties. I've chosen the ones that I wanted. I just type them in. I just want name, status. So I selected those particular properties. Now I also want you to notice, and Jeffrey just did an example of this. I'm going to get child or the alias dir is a great example. Here's a list of files out of my C drive, files and folders. Right now, look at how it's sorting them. Sorting by name and sorting them relatively alphabetically to me. Well, I want to change the sort. I like to sort them by length. And the only thing I want displayed is name and length. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get child item. I'm going to select the properties I want to see are name and length. This is right off the example Jeffrey was doing. I'm going to sort that by the property length. This pipeline, in fact, objects across the pipeline, I can work with these properties and methods, making my life easier. Look at this. It's folder first, and this files. You know what? Notice on my files, it's small z's to big z's. I want big z's to small z's. In other words, I want it descending. So let me type arrow key, and the sort object has a descending. So I can change the sort order and make it descending. That's kind of cool. That's kind of cool. That's it. Again, working with the objects. So working with objects is all about using get member. And we've shown you that you can do sort and you can do select. And we're going to do these quite a bit of selecting and sorting. But there's some other examples. Let's see here. Keep in mind. that process. When you need to know more about an object, it's very important. When you need to know more about an object, it's 7 we're going to need to know more about an object. You type to GM, which is get member. You'll get the type of object it is, which we're going to need this later. And you get all its properties and its methods. And it has a word property in it. You can use it with sort and select like we just showed you that you can use it with. In fact, it's kind of interesting. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. So back to an earlier example, get event log. Ooh, login system, and we're going to do newest. Let's do newest 5. And if I just run this, you can see I'm getting all this information across here. I'd like to take a look at the object itself. So what I'm going to do is, I want to see what all the properties are. I'm going to type it to GM. Wow, there's a lot more properties out here than I was seeing in the original display. Time generated, time written. So you know what I think I have event ID and time generated. And I think I would like, what else would be a good property? Maybe, message. That would be perfect. That would be perfect. So, up arrow. Select property, event ID. Yeah. And if you take a look at the file, you'll see that dash property takes multiple values. So I can do time generated. Or time written. I can type that one.
You tab.
See, I just hit tab and like typing. So I selected those. There we go. Now I actually like to sort them on the time written. Now, guys, this is a VM, so there's not a whole lot of stuff out here, but you get the idea. I'm going to sort on the property of, okay, now I'm getting my time written, and voila. And I want to sort the descending, but now that I'm understanding the pipeline, I know how to find the properties that I want. Not just ones I saw on the display, but I can find all of the properties and then just select the ones I want and sort the ones I want. Now that I have what I want, I don't want it on screen. I want it converted to an HTML file, and I just love this. It's called errors.html. And actually, this will take a UNC. I'll take a UNC.
I think I'm gonna make some coffee and then I'll be back. Or maybe I should just stop streaming now. It feels weird to stop right after I finish this, but it might be better to just stop and then do coffee and then decide if I'm gonna come back or not. And what I want to do now, I think I'm just gonna delete this file here, this folder, create a new one. It's easy. And then I'm gonna install everything and then I'm just gonna follow ChatGPT's instructions. Okay, so I think it works. It's just easier to do like this. And I just install everything again. Which is not just by visiting. I'm gonna install. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT these instructions here, install everything, set up the beginning, and then I'm gonna figure out inside of this model how to create a WebSocket here inside of this and send the information to the front end, which may or may not be difficult. Then once I figure that out, so start the front end. I think I'm gonna use this vault, and I think I'm just gonna use ChatGPT for everything. I'm just gonna follow whatever it says, if I think it makes sense. And then once I have everything set up, then I can think about, like, the main goal that like I said before, is to be able to step through a script and simultaneously look into the graph. So look at the visualization as I step through the sequence of steps in the script and connect the two. And I'm probably gonna have to, I might decide to do with a different framework as well for visualization. I might use the D3 library because I haven't used the other one, so I'm not sure. If the thing is that I think the only one that allows me to create the graphs of the physical simulation with this physics here is the Vue.js, so that's why I think I'm gonna have to use Vue.js. And then if I use Vue.js, I'm probably gonna search for here and then download the library itself on the front end, and then try to change the source code so that I can implement new things that you can do with the nodes, which I think I tried to do before, but it's very complicated, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it or not. Well, it would be very good if I could navigate using the arrow keys through each node, and also implement some logic on the nodes that allow me to navigate through the script as I navigate through the graph. That would be very cool. I'm probably gonna just install the library and then try to see. But I think I'm gonna do this only after, if I can make everything else work. So first the WebSocket, and then creating the graph as it updates through the WebSocket live. Then only after I have that, if I can manage to do that, then I think about the other stuff. So I think I'm gonna stop here, and then I might come back, but probably not, because I usually say that I'm gonna come back, but then end up not coming back. But if I don't, then I'm gonna do this stuff off stream, and then I'm gonna continue to do this probably tomorrow or 2 days from now. So